silly is that? Pulls up three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
And welcome back to the Hoop Junkie Podcast, the number one sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined as always by the one and only Grizzly still man alive man himself, Chance Baker.
Man, just be glad we finally got a win last night because you might have been riding solo the rest of the season if we were 0-7.
Man, look, listen, y'all. Chance sent me a text midway this week saying that, be on the watch out. If the Grizz don't make it out of Portland with a dub, I might be out of the pod. And I'm like, doggone, Chance, is it that bad in Memphis right now?
Yeah, I was about to cancel my league pass. I was about to just turn in my fandom and just football from here on out. It was, yeah, things were getting rough, man. But luckily we got a win, so we're back here. We can talk NBA. Grizzlies aside, there's been a lot of good basketball to watch over the past couple weeks. So excited to get into it.
Dude, first, before we start, if you listen to this pod, please like, subscribe, share, retweet, do all that good stuff. Give us some love so we can continue making these great pods, right? But also, Chance, I first have to shout out my Texas Rangers. If you see my World Series championship hat, yeah, I'm repping. I'm holding it down, man.
You texted me. You're like, the Rangers got the World Series, so I'm good to get back to podcasting again. I was like, I see what you've been up to.
Kind of had to put things on pause, man, because, ain't no telling when I'm going to see another championship in the DFW, right? So, we're going to celebrate this one because everybody, as soon as, the Rangers won, the next thing I know, I kept getting all these messages of these floppy disks from some of my friends saying that, these are where all the Dallas Cowboys championship photos are saved at, all in these floppy disks. And so, you know what? I'm gonna rep my Rangers, man, because at least we won something.
Yep, I don't blame you. So, being born like in Memphis, Tennessee, like we still have never won like any type of championship in any sport. So, and doesn't look like that's changing in the NBA this season. So, I definitely appreciate it while you have it because you never know.
Yeah, man. But Chance, so I mean, talking about those Grizz, man. So it's been hard, man. They finally eke one out on the second game in that series against Portland. And at one point in time, it looked like the Grizz were going to go down 0-7. But
yeah,
I think it's safe to say none of us expected this going into the season, despite knowing that Steven Adams is out for the remainder of the season. Brandon Clark is still dealing with recovery from that Achilles surgery, the Achilles injury he had last year. And then also John Morant is out the first 25 games. We knew it was going to be a challenge. However, I don't think any of us would have guessed at this point that they would have only won one game. Chance, what are some of your concerns with this Grizzlies team at the early part of this season?
I mean, I think the biggest concern is if you were to just pull up the box scores and look at the stats and you see what Jaren and Desmond are averaging, you would think the Grizzlies are 4-3, 3-4 right now. And so the concern is the top level guys are doing what they're supposed to do. Bane looks awesome, and he's only going to look better when you get a guy like Ja complimenting him. And so I think Bane was up to the challenge of being that number one guy. Jaren is still a menace on defense, but his offense, it kind of comes and goes at times. He's still a little clunky on his drives, but for the most part, like he's taken another step up. He's averaging over 20 points a game as well. So when you're getting that type of production from your top two guys with Ja out and Smart's been fine. He's still erratic at times, but I think he's been fine as a third guy. When those three guys are playing up to their standards and you're still dropping your first 6 games, that's when you're like, okay, there's some serious issues within the roster. And yeah, you can say, Adams out, Brandon Clark out, Aldama out. Like there are a lot of injuries, and that's fine. But this is not an 0-6 type of roster. We should have been better than this. And so, biggest concern is when you look back at that 2022 draft, they go all in on youth and internal development. We talked about that on our very first podcast that we did, was that the Grizzlies were banking on internal development, and that just hasn't paid off. Zaire was a 10th pick. He was a project. You expect him to make that leap into year 3. Last year, he kind of right off as an injury-riddled season, and he still just kind of looks like a guy out there. I mean, he looks better than he did last year, which isn't saying much. He's crashing the boards, which is great, but he still isn't really looking like that, next starter wing that you anticipate him being. And besides that, like you trade DeAnthony Melton for David Roddy, and Roddy is basically like your eighth or ninth guy, but we're having to start him at times too. Jake LaRavia basically looks like a G leaguer still going into his third year, and we traded 2 first-round picks for him. And so when you look back to that draft class, you want those guys by year 3 to be contributing guys, and they're just not. And so the back end of the rotation needs some work. Aldama came back. The savior Bismack Biyombo came in last night and actually looked great, but I mean, realistically, that might have been the best game he plays all season. You know, he had 11 rebounds, 3 blocks. Like he looked great out there, but it's unrealistic to expect him to be that good all season. But he was making the right
I,
plays, and
I don't
that's
know,
fun.
man. I've been a fan of Bismack. I can see him keeping up that play. I mean, you're not asking much for him, but to get boards and get block shots, man.
Oh yeah.
Don't be so down, Chance. Don't be
Hey,
so
you asked me
down.
what the problems are, and I led with the good, which is that Bane and Jaron look awesome. But yes, there are a lot of problems, and it's hard not to be down. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. It's early in the season. A lot of teams started slow last year. Obviously, you know, we don't have the star power that the Lakers have, but you know, you saw what they started like 2-9 last year, and they make the Western Conference Finals with the play in. You're always going to be in it. You have to be really, really bad to be eliminated, you know, early in the season. And so when you look at it 1-6 through 7 games, if you can go 9-9, which at this point is asking a lot, then at that point you're 10-15 getting job back, and you're not completely out of it at that point. But it's like,
Right.
you better go 9-9. You better not go, you know, 6-12 over these next 18 games, because before you know it, then you are out of it, and you're having to, you know, there's no more resting guys on back to backs. You're playing your guys 35 minutes a night, just trying to squeak into the playoffs. And that's just a situation you don't want to be in. And so, I mean, there's problems with the back end of the roster. There's nothing to be really done now. They're not going to rush and make a move until they see how it plays out with Ja getting back into the fold. So at this point, the biggest thing is getting that first one off their back. I think you could
Yep.
watch the team and tell, especially with the rotation back end guys, that they were playing tight down the stretch, and they just needed to get this first one. And, you know, who knows, maybe now they got the first one, they'll start to rattle off a few and look back to that Grizzlies with swagger that we've seen before. But it's been rough, man. It's tough seeing all these teams that are just gelling and looking great, and we're out there just losing to getting blown out by 30 to the Jazz, losing to Portland, blowing leads, getting to overtime. It's been tough, but luckily there's been
Yeah.
a lot of other good basketball to watch to try to keep me distracted.
Well, you know, Chance, I think the biggest things too with the Grizz is just watching them is that truthfully, like you see Adams and Ja of just how many open shots they create for other guys from an offense perspective. And then Bane and Jaron have been doing what they need to do. But the truth is, Bane and Jaron, they don't they don't get other people involved in the offense, right? That's not necessarily their game. And honestly, I mean, it kind of doesn't have to be their game to be on a successful team.
Right.
But when you look at from the offensive side of the ball, that's been a big concern of mine. But then also the Grizz, they give up a lot of 3-pointers as
Mm-hmm.
well. And in today's NBA, you know, you see a lot of defenses have changed their defensive strategy to more, hey, look, we'll give you stuff at the rim versus giving you wide open threes. These threes are going to be contested. And then the Grizz just kind of haven't adapted to that this season. Um, so I mean, overall, I mean, I don't think it's as bleak as what it looks like, but
Right.
you're right. They got to pull off a 500 stretch here the rest of the way until Ja gets back, because you know oftentimes people say, you know, you kind of know what a team is after those first 10 games from a 10 game sample size. Some people say 15, 20 games, but generally around about 10 games, you kind of got an idea of where the roster is. But unfortunately, Ja's coming back, and you know, he can only do so much
Right.
depending on where they're at in the standings.
And Ja doesn't solve your defensive issues. To your point, they've been giving up wide open threes like it's shoot around, and that's part of Taylor Jenkins' you know philosophy is they overhelp, they protect the paint, which is fine. But as you mentioned, today's day, it's a lot more shooters on the floor. You're playing teams that basically 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 guys can knock down an open three, and so that could be an adjustment that has to happen as
Mm-hmm.
well. But I mean, that's one thing to note is Ja does not solve your issues. Historically, the Grizzlies have gotten better on the defensive side because we've seen at this point every year Ja either does something crazy or gets injured. And so there's always some stretch of play without Ja, and the defensive rating typically gets better. And that hasn't been the case as well. So they've got some issues to figure out. Ja won't solve all their problems, but at this point, you've got the monkey off your back. You got the first win. Build on that and see where things go from here.
Man, but Chance, in brighter news, my Mavericks have been looking relatively good.
Relatively
So
is an understatement. I've been
re-
extremely impressed by Dallas so far. I had them written off. I think we both had them out of the play-in, and
yeah,
they're what 5-1 now. So yeah, I mean things are
yeah.
looking great. I mean Luca looks like a superhero the first 3 games. He at least looks more human now, but the rest of the team is stepping up. So yeah, what are your takeaways on how your Mavs have been looking?
Well, I mean, so they got this game tonight playing Orlando, which I fully expected to be a trap game. Just Orlando has, which in Charlotte they won last night against Charlotte. With Charlotte and Orlando kind of been some thorns in the Mavericks' side over the past couple years, and even last year, those teams basically sent Dallas packing and not and eliminated from playoff contention last year. But overall, man, the truth is that I think a full off season of Kyrie being in Dallas, and then a full training camp with Luca. I think that has kind of helped from get away from that my turn, your turn basketball. So like from an offensive perspective, like I mean they're humming, and I think the addition of Grant Williams, you really see Grant Williams benefiting from playing with a true point guard, well, with two true point guards and Kyrie and Luca, because I mean, like Grant Williams is getting all of the open shots that he could imagine, and
He's
dude,
taking advantage too. He's been one of the hottest shooters starting out of the gate.
yeah, I saw like he's shooting like 88% from three in the fourth quarter of games.
Insane. Yeah.
So that goes to show you, like, I mean, he's hitting all these threes, but he's also hitting them when it matters.
hmm
And so him, and then the addition of Derek Lively the second, dude, I can't. I mean, if it weren't for Victor Wembanyama being in this draft class, I really think that people would hear a lot more about Derek Lively, and the things that he's been doing for the
He
Mavs. I
outplayed
mean,
him in the first game.
he did outplay him in the first game, and he's also, he's put together a couple double doubles last night. I think he had 15 and 14 last night. I mean, you really see like he was the necessary piece. Last season, I was talking all last season, Chance. I was like, we just need a big, like, this
hmm
Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber tweener stuff at big, consistent diet of it is just not going to work. But Derek Lively has proven to be that guy. He gives shades of Clint Capella to James Harden, right, playing
Exactly.
alongside
Yep.
Luka Doncic, and that is exactly the type of big they needed. Granted, he's still a rookie, so it's still up and down sometimes.
And it
However,
will be. Yeah.
you definitely see the potential is there. I mean, this team, like, going into the season, um, the biggest thing was, okay, did we make improvements to our roster? And yes, can we sneak into the playoffs some kind of how, right? And I think they've kind of answered that so far through this first small percentage of the season. So overall, man, I'm pleased with what it is. Do I expect this Mavs team to still be sitting at the top of the Western Conference? No, probably not. There's way too many good teams in the West
hmm
for this Mavs team, I think, to stay there. However, this play is definitely played to really set up going into this offseason of, hey, now we just got to get one or two more pieces on this roster and we can really make a push.
Yeah, I think agreed. Probably won't see it, sticking where you're winning 5 out of every 6 games. But to your point, Lively being this good so soon definitely raises the ceiling of the team. I had concerns when, it looked like that he was going to be the best big available to start because you're asking for, a teenage rookie to come in and be the starting center for a team that's expected to win now. And that's a tough position. I think that might be why Kidd didn't start him in that opening game because, he just didn't want him to have the pressure of being the opening night starter. But then you realize in the first 10 minutes that he's out there, like, this is by far the best big on the team. We've got to play him 30 minutes a night. And yeah, he'll have up and
Mm-hmm.
downs. He'll have about 15 games this year where he just looks lost or he's in foul trouble. And that's part of being a rookie. We've talked about this before, that point guards and bigs are the two toughest, positions for rookies to come in and be effective right away. But he has been extremely effective right away for the most part. Rookie mistakes aside, the rebounding, the shot blocking, with playing with Luka and Kyrie, just knowing where to be and being explosive enough that he can finish anything around the rim. And he's shown some signs of playmaking as well. He had one game where he had, I think, 6 assists all in one game too. So he's shown a good all around game. I've been extremely impressed with him. And to your point, I think if he can keep the defense to be, instead of like 28th in the league, you're like 20th or 21st, you're going to have a top 5 offense with Luka and Kyrie, especially with some of the miracles that Luka is able to do at the end of the games. And so if Lively and the addition of Grant Williams, like if they can just hold the defense down to where you're like around that 20th range, I think the ceiling is high and they could be a playoff team, maybe even avoid the play in, which would be tough to do with how deep the West is. But the schedule has been kind of soft, so we'll see what happens once they start playing some of the Western Conference contenders. But yeah, I'm very surprised by how the Mavs have looked so far, and I don't see any reason why they can't at least be a top 6 seed in the West.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Chance. Speaking of Derek Lively, right? Like man, let's talk about this rookie class, man. And
Yeah.
and Chance, dude, I you know, Chet has been good, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and say like Chet has been disappointing me, as someone who was in the Chet fan club, and picked him as my preseason rookie of the year going to the year. But Chance, I gotta say that boy Wimbam Yama can't even say his name right.
You better learn
He
his name. We'll be talking about him a lot for the next 10 years.
looks like everything and more of what they said. I am terrified for this kid weighs 209 pounds right now. I'm terrified when he gains 25 pounds and is ripping through the league. There is literally nothing this man can't do, Chance. What has been your early takeaways, especially after you've seen him go into Phoenix and rip off 2 wins back to back, and then putting that second win on ice with 38 points? How are you? What are your overall takeaways from Victor?
I mean, biggest thing is, yeah, I think Victor is going to break the league. Like all of the hype, he was so hyped up going into this draft class, a consensus number one, best prospect since LeBron. And I had some concerns. I still picked him as rookie of the year because, of the talent that he has. But I'm not going to lie, I did not expect him to start with this much of a force. And, his first game against your Mavs, he did start slow, kind of had to get in the rhythm. He dealt with some foul trouble, which took him out. But ever since then, he has lived up to the hype and arguably and then some. I mean, when you just look at him out there, he can literally contest shots from the free throw line. I was talking in a group
Mm,
text where it's like anybody that
mm.
shoots a three with him in the vicinity, he's going to lower their percentages just by jumping up in the air and showing his wingspan. And there's so many little things like that that don't even hit the stat sheet. And then, when you look at the box score and he's got, 38, 13, 4 blocks. I mean, he looks like he is ready to go from day one. And this Spurs team is pretty underrated. The guys around him, Zach Collins is a great fit because he allows Wembanyama to play the 4 and not, get bullied by some of these, stronger centers in the league. And so I think Zach Collins has been the perfect complement. We need him to stay healthy if you're San Antonio so he can keep, airing that 1-2 punch down low. Devin Vassell, my most improved player, got off to a hot start, but now he's injured, so he might be out for a little bit. But it doesn't matter when Wemby is playing like this. I mean, he's a contender for defensive player of the year in his rookie season because he is just altering all kinds of shots. But his offensive game, I did not expect to be so fluid already. I mean, he's making big shots. He's taking threes at the end of the games and drilling them. The Phoenix game was just absolutely crazy. The way he just puts the team on his back like he's a 10-year vet and goes and closes out KD. Like that was just like something I've never
Man,
seen before. And so my biggest thing is the hype is real and he is actually surpassing it, if you could even believe that.
man, he has looked truly like incredible. Chance, are there any other rookies that have stood out to you so far this season outside of those couple of guys we've been talking about? I want to give some other people some love.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Lively, as we mentioned, Brandon Miller's been pretty solid for Charlotte so far. With Miles Bridges out, he's kind of getting an extra opportunity, and I think he's looked great. Obviously still needs to improve on the defensive side of the ball, but he's been hitting
Mhm.
shots, and he looks, warranted of that number 3 pick. Scoot obviously has not looked great so far. A lot of people are kind of panicking on him, as we've mentioned a million times. It'll take some time with rookie point guards. Then he sprained his ankle; he's out for a little bit, but I'm not worried about Scoot at all. I think Scoot will come around and he'll be just fine. The Thompson twins, especially Asar Thompson, really looks good on both sides of the ball. Amin
Mhm.
Thompson still has some more developing to do, and he's kind of in a log jam at the wing in Houston. But Asar Thompson
Dude,
really
he
has
been he
shown,
been he been clamping folks up.
yeah. I mean, him as a rookie, to be able to defend at that level has been really impressive so far.
Mhm.
So those are the big ones that have stood out to me. But it looks like it could be a really solid class, not just from the top, but some of these other guys as well.
Dude, I love Trace Jackson Davis too, out there in Golden State. Just been doing
He
a
could be the
whole
steal
bunch.
of the draft.
Dude, just been doing a whole bunch of those little things for the Warriors that have just been clutch, and he's starting to log minutes for him too, just because of that, right? So, I think he is just another Warriors find, like they always do,
Yep.
and that's some big stuff for him. And I think right now I want to say, does he have 18, 14 right now? And I'm like sitting here talking about him, and then I'm over here pulling box scores. And oh,
Yeah, I
no,
don't know
no,
if he'll be like a
no,
regular
he hasn't.
rotation guy. Yeah, once
Yeah.
they're like fully healthy, but he's shown sparks. So like if they have guys resting on back to backs or they need a role player to come in, like he was, I think the 57th overall pick, like he could come in and play right now, which is impressive. And that's the kind of guys you need if you're Golden State. So yeah, he's definitely been impressive. And another guy I think to keep your eye on is Keontae George. I think Taylor Horton Tucker, I don't think is the long term point guard solution. I think it's only a
Hmm.
matter of time before Keontae takes over that lead point guard role. And he's a guy that I could see kind of he'll be up and down out the gate, but guy having like a Trey Young type of rookie season, wherever that second half of the year he really picks things up. And so he's another guy that I'm really curious to see how he shakes out because I just don't see Taylor Horton Tucker holding that spot for long. I think Keontae is going to be another one of the steals of the back half of the lottery too.
So, Chance. So we talked about a couple teams in the East. Were going to basically lead the East throughout the way, and I think it's kind of been. You could say they both still have been successful. Just because I mean Milwaukee has been a little bit shaky overall, but that's kind of expected when you integrate a new head coach, and then you also bring in someone like Dame Lillard into your team, right? So you kind of expect it not to be perfect, but the biggest thing is right. You don't want to lose a whole bunch of games, right? And right now, they're 3-2, but then that other team in the East. The Boston Celtics just look like doggone world beaters where these guys aren't even playing in the fourth quarter for some of
Yeah.
these games. So, like, what are your overall takeaways with those two big dogs in the East?
Number one takeaway is Drew Holiday is still the most underrated player in the league. I mean, when you put him on Boston, and I think he does everything Marcus Smart could do and then some. And so I just think that's a big reason why they've got off to this hot start because he's a guy that can lock down anybody to go with Tatum and Brown. Porzingis looks like possibly the steal of the offseason as well. I think he's fit in perfectly. Biggest question is can he, play 75 plus games? But if he's healthy for the playoff run, I just don't see a team that can compete with Boston out of the East, including Milwaukee, because they are just loaded on both sides of the ball. Whereas Milwaukee, giving up Drew Holiday, they take a hit on defense, but looking at it right now, they're the 28th rated defensive team, which I don't like to get too deep into stats because, as you mentioned, you really need 10 to 15 games before you really know things. They could have one bad game and they go from, 15 to 25. So it's hard, it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
noise early on with stats, but it's true when you watch them that for one, Dame has never been a defensive guy. We've always known that, whether that be effort or, foot speed. I don't really know what it is, maybe a little bit of both. But you would have thought, as a Bucks fan, you tell yourself, well, now he doesn't have to shoulder so much of a load on offense, so he can commit to defense more. And that just hasn't been the case. Having a team that is expected to defend and has that reputation the way Milwaukee has, and seeing them just, get blown by and giving up wide open layups play after play, and Dame is part of that, that's a real issue. And so for the Bucks, I think they have to go out and they have to go get another wing defender because you've got Chris Middleton on this minutes restriction. He's playing 15 to 20 minutes a night. Hopefully they can ramp him up and get him back to around 30 a night. But with his knees, you just don't really know how much you'll get from him on both sides of the ball at this point. And
Mhm.
Giannis can only do so much. And so on the defensive side of the ball, I have some serious concerns with Milwaukee, whereas Boston, they're just clicking on all cylinders. And I mean, Drew Holiday is a huge part of both reasons for that.
Yeah, man, and and dude, it's crazy because it's like how I think we had talked about the Miami Heat, and you said I'm not ruling them out, and
Yeah.
and I think it's like Drew Holiday is the perfect example of that, like of just someone who people constantly look over, and it's like Milwaukee's like, you know what, we got a chance to upgrade and go get Dame. I get it. I would have made the same decision as a
Oh,
GM
yeah.
as well. But at the same time, sometimes, man, we kind of forget that basketball is a lot more than just putting the ball in the hole. Um, and
Exactly.
and Drew is definitely one of the best at stopping people from putting that ball in the hole,
Yep.
um, for sure. Uh, Chance, a little quick injury update. Robert Williams got injured today. In case, well, I guess what did he get hurt in that Grizzlies game or
Yeah,
what?
so it was a play around the basket, and he just kind of like, it wasn't like a clear, obvious play that happened, but he kind of like started moving a little gingerly, and I noticed it right away. I was like, oh no, that doesn't look good, just because you see him kind of moving gingerly, and he immediately is, pointing for him to come out of the game, and so Aiden comes in for him, and he kind of walks off gingerly to the locker room. So there's no like clear play. I think he just kind of tweaked it like around the basket, but I had immediate concerns then because that's been the concern with Williams the past couple of years, right? Is that his knees are basically shot at this point, and now it seems like he's having season-ending surgery is the latest. They said he's going to have a procedure, and then as of right before this podcast, they're saying it looks like it could be season-ending. And it's just unfortunate. He was such a good young up-and-coming player just a couple years ago. And one thing that I haven't really heard talked about is the Celtics. This is now the second player for Boston that ended up, because of injury decisions, basically has his whole career altered. You look at Isaiah Thomas years ago, he was basically fighting through that hip injury, and they kind of had him play through that when he really needed surgery. And then all of a sudden he's basically washed after that. And now Robert Williams on the opposite side, he has a minor knee procedure so he can get back in time for the playoffs, so he can limp up and down for 15 minutes a game and get back in the playoffs. And he has not been the same ever since then. And they
Mm.
said at the time, if he comes back too soon, this could have long-term consequences. And they're like, no, he's fine. He's fine. Well, now the next 2 years are basically injury riddled, and having season-ending knee injury or knee surgery again, it's just not good for a guy of his size. So I'm a little concerned, with Boston the way they're
Well,
handling things.
and
It's not a good sign for Porzingis.
that's not the first time that we've had this circumstance in Boston. And look at Isaiah Thomas, right? Like,
Yeah, that's what I was
uh,
saying with his hip
y-
injury too.
oh yeah, yeah, and so, yeah, so like, dude, like man, it's kind of crazy, but players definitely watch out and pay attention and stuff like that with some of these
Yeah,
teams.
yeah.
Like
So that's
I get it.
concerning.
Ainge isn't there. You got a new coach and all this stuff too, but yeah, that's you hate to see it, man,
It's unfortunate.
because he has been one of the most promising young bigs out there in the league. So, man, you just hope he gets well.
And for
But
Portland, it's a bummer because that was another trade chip that they were hoping to turn into another asset this year. And now you basically have to punt that for another season and hope he can prove it and be healthy before, you're able to move him.
mhm,
So it really hurts Portland as well because that was a big part of, their moves that they've been making rebuilding. And now they have to hold his contract and wait for him to get healthy again before they can do anything.
man, you're right. You're right. Chance. I don't know how we got into this pod for 28 minutes. We hadn't even mentioned that James Harden has been traded to the Los Angeles Clippers.
I think we were so over it at this point. We talked about it for weeks and weeks, and finally it just happens. We're like, okay, finally. And he actually is having his debut right now. So we haven't got a chance to watch any of it yet. But yeah, it looks like he hasn't even taken a shot yet. Has a couple assists. But yeah, what were your thoughts? It was pretty mediocre return. I think it was good that they were able to end up getting a second pick out of it for the Philly side. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the new look Clippers? How do you expect this to go down?
Well, James Harden, he doesn't play in system. He is a system.
He is a
So,
system. That's what we should have let off with. What a quote.
Oh man, that was a quote. But you know the funny part about it, Chance, is that like truthfully, I mean, he's kind of not lying. I mean, when you look at players who like have generated offense for their teams, nobody has really truly done it better than James Harden has in those years in Houston.
Yeah.
Like you got people that can make arguments for it across the league, but man, James Harden, I mean, he truly was a ready built system. However, I don't know if James Harden should be saying that at what is he now, 35,
Yeah, 34,
34.
35.
Yeah, 34, 35, going into a system that going to a team that's not your team, and your job is to help them with whatever you need help with. I don't necessarily know if I'd be making that stuff going into a locker room with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but hey,
Yeah.
apparently
Read the room.
apparently that yeah, apparently they're cool with it. And so how do I think this is going to work, Chance? I'm not sold on the Clippers by
Yeah.
any means. I'm not
Okay.
sold on the Clippers. Now, here's the thing. Could I change my mind? As they're up 19, as they're up 21-19 on the Knicks right now. But I just you got this just has never worked whenever you've seen this many star players that were particularly veterans at like the end of their career in this way, like you saw like in Brooklyn, and you saw that blow up with KG, Paul Pierce, Joe Johnson, and all of them. I just I just haven't seen that happen too many times in successful ways.
Mhm.
It has happened in some cases, successful like the Lakers. When they repeat, they had a couple vets on that team, but they all fell in their role. The 2011 Mavericks, they had a whole bunch of vets that were all stars in the past, but they were all older and fell in their role. With this
Mhm.
Clippers team, I just don't see that. I think there are a whole bunch of guys that are still like in like mentally like, hey, I'm in my prime, and I'm still gonna go. And I'm just super curious to see how it all works. And for the Clippers to once again roll all their dice in a similar situation, dude, this is just not making well for a story that like the glass is half full. I'm very half empty on this whole trade from the
Yeah.
Clippers
I
perspective.
I get that. I'm a little higher on the Clippers than I'd say you are. I still don't put them in the top tier. I think from what we've seen so far, we haven't even talked about them yet, but I think Denver is clear and cut, still the top team out west. I would put
Mhm.
the Clippers in that, tier two. There is a little bit of a gap. I don't see them as, a team that could win the West, even when healthy, just because for one, I have to see them healthy and I don't buy into them having a full season like that. And
Mhm.
two, I'm also curious about the fit. I'd like to see what they do once Terrence Mann is back in the lineup. Obviously, he hasn't gotten to play yet with the ankle injury. So, in theory, it makes sense to bring Westbrook off the bench and, start Harden, George, Kawhi, Terrence Mann, and Zubac. But it seems like they're committed to starting Westbrook as well. So when you've got Westbrook, Harden, George, and Kawhi, and there's only one ball to go around, it is an interesting dynamic and an interesting fit. Obviously, they can pull Westbrook early and kind of stagger the minutes, but you've got a lot of guys that want the ball in their hands. I will say Westbrook looks pretty great so far as like, adapting to his new role and fitting in as more of a role player type and just a guy that brings energy, something he probably should have done a couple years ago. Maybe things would have gone better, across the street with the Lakers. But overall, I'm a little concerned with the fit, but if they're all healthy and Kawhi is playing on back to backs and dropping 30 points still, Kawhi looks pretty solid so far. If they're all healthy, they should be a team that could finish in the top four in the West. But I still don't think they'll have what it takes to beat a team like Denver. So it raises their ceiling a little bit. It helps you because now if you have one guy out, you have another star that can kind of fill in. So getting another star is always good. But I still don't think they're quite at that level. And they've kind of used all the assets they can to get more pieces. So it's just in
Yeah.
case I'm ready to see how they look with all four of those guys playing and seeing them how they interact with each other. I'll be curious to see how that goes and see if they can all adapt to Harden's system since it's his system.
On the flip side of that, Chance, how are you feeling about now the reins are taken off of Tyrese Maxey, and it's his team from the as a guard. It's him and Embiid, and now Tobias Harris moves back to third best player. And they also got some solid role players from the Clips in that trade, right? So, how are you feeling about Philly for the short term and for the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think Maxi being so good to start off the season is what allowed this deal to happen because you go out and you see that, okay, yeah, it looks like he's ready to take a step. Like it might be better to just get Harden out of here because I think we've got all we need. And that might be the case. I was pretty low on Philly because I thought the Harden thing would drag on longer. And, I wasn't sure if they had enough without him, but I think I might have been wrong. Embiid still looks like Embiid of last year. He's still doing whatever he wants out there. And Maxi is clearly taking that step up. Obviously, you want to see him continue to get better on the defensive side of things, and that's where it's really going to make or break
Yeah,
Philly. But the guys that they got, getting a guy like Covington back, who's a great, especially a great off-ball defender, can help make up some of those mistakes that Maxi might have on point of attack. So yeah, I think Maxi's looked awesome so far. Definitely a most improved player candidate, and him being that good allowed the trade to happen. Now he can really unleash and flourish and have the ball in his hands, and so I definitely don't think Philly is on that top level to compete with a team like Boston just yet, but they still have a couple more assets that they could go out and make another move as well. So now that they've got these assets from the Clippers trade, they're a team that taking those picks,
hmm
I doubt they hold those picks and draft those picks in a few years. I think that's going to be additional trade pieces that they go out and get, even if it's just like a solid role player. You might not need a third star with the way Maxi's playing, but if you can just take those picks to get you one or two role players, maybe get like an OG Anunoby or somebody like that, then that could really elevate their ceiling as well. But I love what I've seen from Philly so far.
Yeah, well, Daryl Morey has written the book on trading for star players. So,
Uh
Chance,
huh.
it ain't gonna be no role player they're gonna try to go out and get. It's a
That's
Daryl
very
Morey
true. He's going
team.
to aim high.
So, yeah, so if I had to bet my money, I bet my money that it's gonna be cashing in all those picks and some of those players to get a three piece team with Embiid, Maxi, and whoever else it is.
Yep.
Chance, so the Nuggets are riding high. I mean, you got anything to say about them? I mean, I feel like do we talk about them or we just say, hey, business as usual?
At this point, it is. It's business as usual. I mean, they lose Bruce Brown, and it's just next man up. Peyton Watson has looked great as a wing defender. He's a guy to keep your eye on throughout the year, as a guy that's going to possibly earn some serious minutes for them. But I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you have Murray and Jokic, we've said this time and time again, which Murray is dealing with a slight hamstring issue. I haven't seen the latest on that, but at the end of the day, when you have those two guys, you're going to be one of the best teams in the league. They're basically exactly who we thought they were. There were some concerns that they didn't do enough in the offseason to kind of keep things up. And I think those concerns are pretty much squashed at this point. It is interesting that the Timberwolves seem to be the one team that matches up with them really well with their two bigs. I think that was their only loss so far. And they arguably they
Yeah,
gave them the best, the toughest matchup in the playoffs last year. So
right.
that's one little small thing to keep your eye on. Maybe that's the way to attack them is, overload on, bigs and go big as opposed to playing small. But I mean, yeah, not much to say. It's business as usual. I'll see you, in April when they're the one seed in the West, and then we can start to talk about them essentially.
Man, so, and these two teams are playing today, Chance, but the Lakers and the Miami Heat, Chance, have been a little bit surprising to me so far in this season. The Lakers are just 3-3, floating around 500, and it's some games they look like okay they're starting to figure it out, but then other games it's like golly they really need a point guard.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then from the Heat's perspective, had a disappointing offseason, and now they're 2-4. Which, if you were going to bet your money on which team should hit the panic button first, which team would you hit the button on first?
I'm panicking on Miami first. I think with them, they just don't look like they've got it. Jimmy Butler, you expect him after all that talk to come out playing great, and he looks like I don't know if it's just fatigue from the deep playoff run and multiple deep playoff runs, but he doesn't look like he has that same spring. So I'm a little concerned about that. And at the end of the day, they missed out on all the blockbuster deals. They were looking for Dame, they were looking for Drew Holiday, and they were basically that team that was over on the corner and got missed out on all the stars. And so at this point, they really needed somebody like that to be that second fiddle. I think Bam looks pretty good so far. I think he's taking another step and he's showing more aggression on the offensive end, but they still need another guy to step up. And they look old to me, and they look a little cooked, to be honest. I'm a little panicked on them. If I were them,
Yeah.
I'd really try to find another star wing that they can get in there. I know they've been trying to move Hero, who I think has looked fine on the offensive end. We know the concerns with him are on defense, and so that's never going away. But I'd be more concerned if I'm Miami. On the Lakers side, I'm not too concerned. It's a veteran team. They started a little slow. You do have to monitor Austin Reeves. He does not look like the same guy as last year. He looks a little more hesitant. He's not being as efficient on the offensive end. And it's kind of weird. Like, a lot of these guys that played for Team USA had kind of struggled out of the gate, which typically it's the opposite. But Austin Reeves is a guy that I thought would take another leap this year. He just got his contract, and he just looks a little
Yeah.
off. I think he'll turn it around. He's a
And
guy that his ceiling's probably a little limited, but he's looked a little off so far.
which is crazy because normally those guys come back from the Olympics revved up. Usually, like they
Yeah.
usually get off to a quicker start. But this is different. This team didn't win anything, so uh,
Yeah. Yeah, like him, Walker Kessler had a horrendous start to the season. Paolo was very
yeah,
inefficient to start the year. He's kind of bounced around, come back around a little bit. But
yeah.
yeah, a lot of those Team USA guys that you expect that, they learned from that, had a great summer. A lot of them came out of the gate struggling. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think you'd like to see Austin Reeves get it together. To your point, they still really need a point guard. I think D'Angelo Russell is a classic, like, good with the ball in his hands. He's a really good passer, but he's a terrible decision maker. And so he's going to have, 3 or 4 just crazy turnovers because he's trying to force things as well. I stand by. I don't think Russell's on the team by the end of the season, but he's had a couple hot games too. So we'll see, what they do with him. But overall, as long as AD and LeBron are healthy, they're going to be a team that has a fighter's chance in the West. So as long as they can play 500 or above, which they are so far, I'm not too concerned with them. I think Miami's the team that should really be panicked at this point.
And look, Chance, I mean, that's really all I got for us to talk about today. However, you have been blowing my phone up with these rants about League Pass and Bally's. So I'm going to give you the floor to go ahead and get it off of your chest.
Yeah, so every single season, I just feel like it's the same story. When you've got people that just want to watch the NBA and they're willing to pay money to watch the NBA, and they pull up the app on their TV and it just doesn't load, and I just don't know what to do at this point. So you've got Adam Silver, he gets on, he gets publicly on and he's like, "Hey, we just need more young fans to watch the games." But there's no way for them to watch the game. They download League Pass and it crashes every season. I feel like the first 2 weeks, it's basically hit or miss if League Pass is going to work. Even if you want to watch your favorite team, they're blacked out locally, so you have to find ways around it. You try to download Bally Sports, and I don't know if I don't know if the Mavs are even on Bally, or since you're out of town, you can watch on League Pass.
They're a Bally
But
team.
Bally Sports has been a complete disaster for the 8 or 9 teams that are on it. I know Cleveland had a couple games that just completely it wiped out. They weren't able to watch their team. The Grizzlies have had a couple games like that where it's like the fourth quarter and the app just crashes. And I'm not even going to lie to you, Zach. I use League Pass in a VPN to change my location just to watch the Grizzlies. And I'll admit it on this podcast that gets, I don't know how many views, probably, not thousands, but enough people that maybe this will go around. But Adam Silver, I hope you do hear this. Come after me, because you've got to make your product better. You want people to be able to watch your games. And a couple years ago, you could put it on any, local, Fox Sports channel and you'd have your team. But now, how many people do you know that would love to watch the Grizzlies or the Mavericks or a local team, and they just don't because you have to have DirecTV Stream or you have to have Bally Sports Plus? And if a guy can't just like put the TV on and watch his local team, they're not going to bother doing it if they're a casual fan. They're going to wait till the playoffs. They're going to watch nationally televised games, and that's it. And so I think if you want to grow your viewership, you've got to change the way that this is presented to the fans, because there's just no good option right now. If you want to watch your local team, it's 50-50 if Bally works, or you can try the whole VPN thing, but that, is spotty as well. And if you want to watch League Pass, that works half the time too. There's errors that pop up. The streaming is not good. I don't see why there's not a one solution where you just have League Pass. You can watch whoever you want to, click of a button. I think the NBA is way behind, and I just hope that when they get this new TV deal that they fix this, because it is a train wreck right now. And you can look on local team subreddits. You can look on NBA subreddit. It's a problem everywhere. I promise it's not just me. NBA, you've got to do better. It's a nightmare right now.
Well, damn.
I
All
had to
right, y'all.
get that off my chest.
Well, I couldn't have said it better, brother. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. All right. Until next time, we'll holla at you. Peace.